You think someone dressed like that has millions in an account here? If you cannot prove it, get out now." The shout sliced through the air like a blade crashing down in the marble-tiled bank lobby. All eyes snapped around. Faces of surprise, whispers rising from the waiting seats. A man stood still at the counter, wearing a wrinkled white t-shirt and faded jeans, holding out his card and ID. No unnecessary movement, no outburst of reaction. Yet in his eyes, something stirred. His name was Julian Cole, 46 years old. On the outside, just an ordinary man. But his silence hid a storm. In only 7 minutes, every employee in this Apex Bank branch would be out of a job, and none of them realized that the man they had just insulted was their ultimate boss. The gleaming lobby echoed with every word beneath the high ceiling. Customers seemed glued to the scene before them. Branch manager Nora Whitfield, 51, stood with arms crossed, her sharp, shrill voice slicing through the room. Her gaze swept Julian from head to toe, as if he were a beggar who had wandered into a sanctuary for the elite. Julian did not move, did not flinch. No tremor, no quickened breath. But inside, old memories surged back, times when he was stopped because of his skin, because of clothes that did not fit their standard. The ember from years ago now burned again. He placed his card on the glass counter. His voice was low and firm. "I am here to withdraw $1 million. Transfer it today." A heavy silence dropped. Then from behind the glass, teller Derek Shaw, 34, chuckled. His voice carried through the intercom across the lobby. "You need to check your documents. We have seen plenty of scammers dressed exactly like you." A few customers snickered. Julian's face did not change. His heart did not race. His tone did not rise. But his eyes hardened, like steel in the forge. "I gave you my card. My identity is valid." "The account is real," he replied, each word pressed down like stone. Derek did not bother to glance at the screen. He leaned back in his chair, lips curling. "We need proof of balance. And change your story into something more believable." From the side of the counter, Kayla Trent, 29, suddenly reached over, snatching Julian's card. A cold snap rang out as she slid it into a drawer and locked it. "This card is suspicious. It could be stolen. You should leave right now." The air in the lobby fractured. A young woman gasped. A man near the potted plant whispered, "Did she just accuse him of stealing?" From the corner, a phone was raised. Sophie Kim, 31, a regular client, her eyes blazing, activated her camera. "This is racial discrimination right here at Apex Bank," she declared loudly for all to hear, pressing upload. Moments later, Noah Patel, 34, a freelance journalist, pulled out his phone and went live. "Get his name," Sophie urged. "We need evidence." At the adjacent counter, Amaya Brooks, 26, a junior staffer who had stayed quiet, her hands trembling. She had long lived under Nora's shadow, but this scene crossed every line. "He has the right to be served," Amaya said, her voice small but steady. Nora spun around, her eyes flashing. "You are not allowed to argue. Stand still and do your job." Amaya clenched her teeth and stepped forward. "I am obligated to follow procedure, and it is you who are breaking it." Kayla smirked, shooting Amaya a glance. "You do not know who he is. Men like him only come to scam." Julian slowly turned, meeting Kayla's eyes, then Nora's, then pausing on the locked drawer holding his card. His voice dropped, almost a whisper, but enough to fill the lobby. "You are destroying Apex. This is not just about me. This is about all of you." A chill ran down Amaya's spine. Nora only laughed coldly, a hand secretly pressing the system alert. Suspicious activity flagged. Prepare to call the police. Derek's voice came sharp through the speaker. Final warning. Leave now, or we escalate to law enforcement. Julian did not move. Instead, he drew out his phone slowly, not to record but to call. Renee, he said quietly when the line picked up. Activate internal surveillance. A calm female voice replied. Engaged. Everything is being recorded. Awaiting your command. Julian pressed his lips. Not yet. Not now. Sophie's camera swung. Noah's commentary rolled. Online viewers began pouring in. Whispers in the lobby had turned into furious chatter. Amaya stepped closer, blocking Kayla, her eyes fierce. You have no right to hold his card without cause. Kayla flicked her hand dismissively. I fear nothing. Nora is behind me. Enough! Nora screamed, her voice echoing across the lobby. Amaya, you disgrace yourself. And you, sir, you do not belong here. Leave now. Customers erupted in protest. A male voice rang out. He is a legitimate client. Why are you putting hands on him? But Derek had already come around the counter, his hand clamping on Julian's elbow. Do not make this hard, Derek growled. This place is not for people like you. The air thickened, seconds from erupting into violence. Some customers recoiled in fear, others stepped forward, blocking the way, furious. Julian remained calm, only his hand tightening. His voice cut through, low but resonant. Let go, right now! In that instant, Amaya shoved Derek away, her voice breaking but unyielding. You cannot touch a client. His account is valid. You have not even checked the screen. Derek's face flushed with contempt. Nora barked. He is a fraud. You will all see. Her shout clashed with the uproar of the crowd. And then, like a blade ripping the curtain, Noah read aloud the name printed on the card as he tugged the drawer slightly open. Julian Cole. The room froze. A gasp rose somewhere. Wait, is that Julian Cole? Silence. Nora faltered, her eyes flickering with panic before rage masked it again. She shouted, Lock the drawer! No one touches that card! Kayla's grip tightened on the drawer as though guarding a state secret. But Julian only stood tall, his shoulders square, his gaze like ice. He had not revealed anything yet. But the balance in the room had shifted. Every client was watching, hearts pounding. They still did not know who this man truly was. But one thing was certain. He was no fraud. And very likely, they had just lit the fuse of a storm this branch would never forget. The bank lobby felt like it was about to collapse. The name Julian Cole, spoken aloud by Noah, rang like an alarm bell. Phones lifted higher, lenses darted faster. The crowd held its breath, everyone hearing those two words, yet none daring to believe them. Nora Whitfield froze, her eyes flickering with doubt, a flash of fear crossing her face. But then she rebuilt her familiar wall of arrogance and screamed to drown it out. Do not believe him. He is an imposter. That card is suspicious. No one is allowed to touch it. Kayla Trent slammed her palm against the locked drawer, her glare fierce. This card is evidence of fraud. He needs to leave right now. No more arguments. Julian looked around, his eyes sweeping over every face. Nora, Derek, Kayla, then stopping at Amaya. The young teller trembled, yet in her eyes there was resolve. A fragile strength, but one swelling amidst a sea of passivity. He drew in a slow breath, then released words like a hammer striking a glass. You will regret this. Every single one of you. The words were not loud, but they froze the air. Then Derek stepped out, rougher this time, gripping Julian's arm and dragging him toward the door. The sudden violence made customers scream. Let him go, An older man shouted, "He is a client! Do not touch him!" A woman in a blue dress rushed forward, recording Derek up close. But Derek did not release him, his grip tightening, pulling Julian step by step. It felt like dragging a stone, because Julian did not resist, nor did he move. He simply stood firm. And that calm only made Derek's face burn hotter. Kayla spat through the speaker. "He does not belong here. Men like him only come to cause trouble." Each word sliced the air like a blade. Customers erupted in anger. Shouts, shoes scraping on marble, phones capturing it all. Julian locked his eyes on Derek, his voice low yet resonant across the lobby. "Let go. Now. Immediately." At that instant, Amaya Brooks broke free, pushing Derek aside. Her voice cracked but carried, trembling yet defiant. "You have no right to touch a client. He has a legitimate account. I can prove it." The lobby fell silent. Derek faltered, stepping back half a pace. Nora slammed her hand on the counter, seething. "Amaya, you will lose your job for this stupidity. He is a fraud." But then voices began to rise from the customers. "She is right. This is blatant discrimination. He has not even had his account checked." Sophie lifted her phone higher, her voice cutting through. "The whole country will see this. Do not think you can hide it," Noah added, broadcasting live. "Look here. A black customer, dressed simply, treated like a criminal with no evidence. This is discrimination alive, right here in Seattle." Nora's face drained of color, but instead of retreating, she screamed through the microphone. "Security! Code red! Get him out now!" The room paused for half a second, then chaos, but everyone knew this branch had no security guards. It was only an empty threat. Julian still stood there, phone in hand. Then a female voice came from the other end, steady, cold as steel. "Julian, all audio and video have been captured. We are monitoring. You have full authority to activate." It was Renee Park, his assistant. Julian did not answer. He looked straight at Nora, his gaze burning through her false facade. Then he turned to Amaya, speaking slowly. "They think they hold power, but you are the one following procedure. Keep going." Amaya swallowed hard, then summoned her courage, tapping on the terminal beside her. Within seconds, her voice rang out. "Account. Julian Cole. Verified. Balance. Immense. This is not an ordinary client. This is one of our highest-tier clients." The lobby exploded. Gasps, shouts, laughter. Kayla froze. Nora's mouth opened without words. Derek stumbled back, pale. Olivia filmed Amaya's screen up close, yelling into her camera. "Do you see? This is the truth. They insulted their most important client." Julian stepped forward, his voice ringing out, sharp as a verdict. "You called me a fraud. You seized my card. You dragged me out of here before dozens of witnesses. And you think your petty power can cover it up?" His eyes cut into Nora's, each word a blade. "You were wrong. Very soon the power will turn." Nora staggered, her heart racing, yet her mouth forced another shout. "This is a trick. He is an imposter. Corporate will never see this." Julian's lips curled into a cold smile. He raised his phone, switching on speaker. A man's voice rang out, clear. "Julian, we are watching. The board has convened an emergency meeting. You have full authority to act." His name was Thomas Greer, a board member. His voice froze the entire lobby. Customers turned toward Nora, faces seething with anger, eyes filled with disdain. Sophie whispered, "Oh my God, it is him, the CEO of Apex." Noah clenched his phone, his voice carrying through the live stream. "Bear witness. This is the moment a bank branch insulted its own CEO." Gasps, heavy breathing, Murmurs rippled through the hall like a tidal wave. Julian stood there, in a wrinkled t-shirt and faded jeans, no bodyguards, no expensive suit. Yet in that moment, he towered over them all. He did not need to shout, did not need display. His presence alone forced the room to bow. He walked forward slowly, each step echoing across the marble floor. His eyes fixed on Nora, his voice deep and resounding. "I did not come here to pretend. I came as a customer, and you revealed your true face. Now prepare yourselves." No one breathed, no one moved. Every eye locked on him. In the past 7 minutes, an entire play of power had been overturned, and now the real storm was about to begin. The bank lobby, once silent, now overflowed with chaos. The rattling of cameras, the murmur of customers, the sound of heavy breaths. Yet in the eye of the storm, Julian Cole stood calm, like a rock in a rushing river. He lifted his head, his eyes sweeping across the hall. Every gaze hid unease, every hand shook while gripping a phone. An entire crowd was witnessing the truth, and the truth no longer belonged to Nora. Nora Whitfield clenched her teeth, sweat dripping from her forehead. She felt her power crumbling piece by piece, but she refused to yield. Her voice, hoarse yet commanding, hurled one last order. "Throw him out! This is blatant impersonation! Do not believe him!" Derek Shaw glanced at Nora, hesitation flickering in his eyes. His hand still trembled, recalling the moment Julian looked straight at him with eyes of fire. For the first time in his career, Derek felt fear toward a customer, but Nora's furious glare forced him forward. He growled, "I will do it. Even if I have to drag him out." He lunged, seizing Julian's shoulder, shoving hard toward the door. The hall erupted in shouts. "Let him go! Do not touch him! He is your CEO!" But Derek's grip tightened, his body rigid with fury. Julian stumbled, his back slamming against the glass door with a sharp crack. A sting shot down his spine, yet the fire in his eyes didn't dim. He whispered, his voice low, yet reverberating through every heart. "You just laid hands on the CEO of Apex Bank." The words dropped, and silence swallowed the room. The first to break it was Amaya Brooks. She stepped forward, standing between Derek and Julian, her voice trembling yet ringing out. "Stop! He is not just a customer. He is our CEO." Gasps spread. Nora's eyes bulged. "What did you just say?" Amaya turned, meeting Nora's gaze, her words sharp and unyielding. "Julian Cole, CEO, the true owner of this bank." An invisible explosion ripped through the room. Customers shouted. Sophie screamed into her camera. "Did you hear that? They tried to throw their own CEO out of the bank." Noah's voice shook as he spoke into his live stream. "We are witnessing a historic scandal. A CEO humiliated and assaulted by his own employees inside the very branch he owns." Kayla Trent's face drained of color, her hand slipping from the drawer as she staggered back. Derek dropped his grip, his eyes wide, breath shallow, his body frozen as if he had touched live wire. Julian straightened, walking forward step by step, each echo of his shoes on marble pounding like a drum of judgment. He stopped at the counter, his voice booming. "I have endured enough. You did not just insult me. You insulted the very soul of Apex Bank." Nora retreated, still clinging to denial. "Impossible! You are a fraud! No CEO would dress like this! You are deceiving them all!" Julian laughed, a dry, cold laugh that cut like ice. "That arrogance has blinded you. I do not need a suit to prove power. True power lies in every decision, in every person I choose to keep or cast aside." He raised his phone, switching to speaker. The voice of Thomas Greer, a board member, rang out clearly. "The board has reviewed all data. Julian, you have full authority to act. You have our absolute support." The sound of ragged breathing swept the room. A few customers clapped, the scattered applause striking like hammers against Nora's head. Julian lowered his phone, his voice steady and sharp as a blade. "Nora Whitfield, Derek Shaw, Kayla Trent, you have violated protocol, disgraced customers, and stained the honor of this bank. Effective immediately, you are terminated." The hall erupted. Gasps, applause, cheers collided into a roar. Sophie shouted, "Justice on the spot!" Nora's face turned ashen, her scream desperate. "You have no authority. This must go through HR procedures." But the computer screen before her suddenly went black. The system locked, her access revoked. From the phone, Renee Park's voice rang out. "Access for the 3 named has been revoked. HR has received notification. Emergency termination is in effect." Kayla covered her face, whispering, "No, this cannot be." Derek collapsed to his knees, trembling violently. Nora stood frozen, lips moving without words. Customers cheered. A young man shouted, "Yes, this is justice." Amaya stood beside Julian, her eyes wet but glowing with light. She whispered. At last, someone dared to stand up. Julian tilted his head toward her, his gaze soft amid the storm. His voice was gentle yet firm. "You made the right choice, and you will not be forgotten." The hall fell silent for a few seconds, letting those words sink in. Everyone knew in that very moment power had shifted. Those who once humiliated were now stripped from their throne. And the man in a simple white t-shirt and faded jeans was rewriting history. The sound of the drawer slamming shut as Kayla Trent locked away Julian's bank card cut through the air like a cold blade. The entire banking hall froze, then quickly erupted into whispers, uneasy glances, and even the curious excitement of some customers eager for drama. Julian stood motionless, like a statue in a square, yet in his eyes a fragile flame flickered, faint but sharp. He stared directly at Kayla, then at Nora Whitfield, who stood with arms crossed, a smug smile plastered across her face, the mask of power she had worn for years. "You don't belong here," Kayla declared with disdain. "If you don't want me to call the police, you'd better leave right now." A woman gasped loudly, the sound slicing through the tension. A man shook his head and whispered, "My God, did they just say that to a customer?" From across the lobby, Sophie Kim, a young customer, raised her phone, switched on live stream, and her voice rang with fury. "This is discrimination, and everyone is going to see it." Nora's eyes flashed with alarm. She stepped forward, lowering her voice as if to cover the scene. "Put your phone away. This is a bank's internal matter. It has nothing to do with anyone else." But Sophie stood her ground, her head held high as she shouted, "No, this concerns all of us. If one person can be treated this way, then any of us could be the next victim." The mood shifted. Several customers raised their phones, cameras now pointed at the counter. The illusion of power Nora and Kayla thought they controlled was slipping from their grasp. Amaya Brooks, the young teller, felt her heart pounding. Her hands trembled, but her voice rose clear. "He has the right to withdraw his money. He has done nothing wrong. Locking a customer's card without cause is a violation of procedure." Nora spun toward Amaya, her eyes like daggers. "Be quiet. You have worked here for 2 years and still haven't learned the basics? We do not serve troublemakers." Amaya swallowed hard, but stepped forward, placing herself between Julian and Nora. "I serve customers," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "You serve your own prejudice." The hall exploded with murmurs. An elderly man spoke up. The girl is right. This is wrong. Plain and simple wrong. Julian remained still, but his eyes swept the room slowly, from the angry customers to the bewildered employees, and finally to the tense faces of Nora, Kayla, and Derek. His voice broke through, deep and resonant, like a bell tolling in a cathedral. You are not humiliating me. You are humiliating Apex. And you will pay for it. Kayla scoffed, her tone dripping with mockery. Pay? A man in an old t-shirt and faded jeans thinks he can threaten us? Fine. I'll call the police right now. She reached for the desk phone, but before she could dial, a voice rose from the crowd. It was Noah Patel, a young journalist who happened to be there. Wait, before you call the police, maybe you should look at the name on the card you just locked away. He moved closer, tugging the drawer open just enough before Kayla could stop him. It was only a moment, but long enough for him to read aloud. Julian Cole. The air froze. Every murmur died, replaced by a suffocating silence. A customer whispered, Wait, is that Julian Cole, the CEO of Apex Financial Group? Nora's eyes flickered with panic. Kayla went pale. Derek swallowed hard, his hands dropping uselessly to his sides. Julian's lips curved, not into a smile, but into a line of resolve. He neither nodded nor denied. He simply spoke, his voice slow and heavy, like a stone dropping into a still pond. You will soon know what you've just done. The silence shattered. Sophie screamed into her camera. Did you hear that, everyone? This is the CEO. They just called their own CEO a fraud. The hall erupted with shouts. A customer pointed at Nora, yelling, You just insulted your own boss. A woman cried out, He owns this bank and you are the imposters. Nora tried desperately to shout above the uproar. Quiet! This is just a trick. It cannot be true. But Julian's eyes locked on hers, cutting through her arrogance like a blade. He didn't need to say another word. The truth had already begun to surface. In that moment, everything Nora and her allies clung to, power, control, the fear they had cultivated, began to fracture. And what remained was undeniable. The man they thought they could insult and drive out was the very one who held their fate in his hands. The bank lobby still echoed with shouts and murmurs, but within the chaos another silence was forming, the silence of anticipation. Every eye turned toward Julian Cole, the man who had just stood tall and declared the dismissal of 3 key employees. Nora's face went pale as she screamed in desperation, Impossible! This is illegal! There must be a process! There must be an investigation! Julian's gaze cut through her mask of arrogance like a blade. An investigation? You already held your own when you ridiculed me in front of dozens of witnesses. You already sentenced me when you locked my card in a drawer. And you already carried out the verdict when you ordered me dragged out of this bank. You left no room for justice, except for it to end here and now. Nora's computer screen flickered, then went dark. Her access revoked. She let out a strangled cry, drowned beneath the sea of phones recording her downfall. The crowd erupted, not in fear, but in the fury of release. A woman in a blue dress pointed at Nora, her voice trembling with rage. I once filed a complaint because my loan paperwork was delayed, and you ignored it. Now what? You buried everything. A middle-aged man raised his hand. Me too. They lost my check for 3 days. And now I know why. Julian arched a brow, turning to the remaining staff. Derek Shaw lowered his head, his body shaking. Finally, he stammered out a confession, his voice broken. There was a list. Nora told us to stall transactions for customers not up to standard. They were usually people of color, dressed simply. She said if they complained, Just delay them until they grew frustrated, then file a fraud suspicion report. The lobby exploded like lightning had struck. Customers shouted in unison. Sophie pushed her phone toward Derek's face, her voice sharp though choked with emotion. You just admitted it, and this is live-streamed. The entire nation will hear. Nora shrieked, her voice shrill. Lies! You're slandering me. You're just trying to save yourself. Derek shook his head, tears spilling. No, it's the truth. We were forced. I was wrong to stay silent. But today it cannot be hidden any more. Julian's eyes bore into him, not with rage, but with a chilling coldness. You were complicit. Confession doesn't erase guilt, but at least it exposes the truth. And that truth will save the system. As his words fell, Leo Martinez, a teller barely in his 20s, stepped forward, trembling, his fists clenched, his face drained of color. I have to say this too. There were 3 official complaints: a black businessman, a Latino customer, a Filipino customer. All wrote that they were discriminated against. But Nora ordered them destroyed. We tore them up and threw them away. I am sorry. I cannot hold it in any more. Silence gripped the lobby. Then came sharp breaths, curses under people's tongues. An elderly woman whispered, her eyes wet. Exactly what I went through. I thought it was just my imagination. Noah's voice, tight with fury, cut through on the live stream. You're hearing confessions, complaints cancelled, evidence destroyed. This is no longer an incident. This is a system allowed to fester. Julian stood still, closing his eyes briefly. When they opened, his gaze was razor-sharp, no longer the humiliated customer, but the CEO presiding over a public trial. His voice hammered down, each word like iron striking stone. You have witnessed it with your own eyes. This is no longer a bank branch. This is the crime scene of a moral offense. And from today, this crime scene will become the starting point for reform. He raised his phone, his tone steady. Renee, collect every complaint log from all branches. Cross-check against staff records and override commands. If there is repetition, expand the investigation. Understood, Renee replied. Compliance is engaged. Nora slumped into her chair, her eyes vacant. Kayla buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Derek stared at the ground, shaking. Leo wiped tears from his cheeks, his face lighter now that the truth was freed. Among the crowd, Sophie turned her camera toward Julian, her voice clear. This is a rare moment where justice stands naked. The CIO of Apex Bank is not using power to conceal but to expose. Whoever is watching, share this. Let the world see. Applause broke out, spreading like waves. Not wild but steady, sure, like the heartbeat of agreement. Julian lifted his head, his voice calm and resonant. Remember this. Power does not lie in a suit, nor in a title on a business card. True power is the courage to face corruption and cut it away. He turned to Amaya, his eyes softening in the storm. You chose to speak. You stepped forward when others stayed silent. That is what an institution needs. And from today, you will no longer be just a teller. Amaya froze, tears spilling down her cheeks. Customers clapped again, louder now, cheers rising with them. Nora watched in despair, her lips trembling as she gasped. You are destroying this bank. Julian faced her, resolute. No, I am saving it. In that moment, everything shifted. The Fifth Avenue branch was no longer an ordinary bank. It had become a courtroom. The customers were the jury, and the verdict had already begun its execution. The applause had not yet faded when Julian raised his hand. The lobby fell silent at once. He stood at the center, white lights casting down on his simple T-shirt, but at that moment it shone brighter than any tailored suit. His voice rang steady and powerful, each word like a verdict. Effective immediately, Apex Bank's Fifth Avenue branch is frozen. All operations are suspended. The air froze solid. Everyone held their breath. No transactions will be processed today. No appointments will be taken. No funds will be moved. From this moment, this place is no longer a bank. It is a courtroom, and justice is the only business conducted here. A sharp beep sounded from the speakers, followed by Renee Park's voice, carrying across the lobby. Confirmed. The Fifth Avenue branch is now under lockdown. Internal systems are restricted to CEO and authorized compliance staff. All functions are halted. Every monitor across the branch went dark. Several employees went pale, pounding their keyboards in vain. Even the back exit flashed red, rejecting access cards. Nora Whitfield shot to her feet, screaming with despair. "You can't do this! This is a bank, not your power game!" Julian turned, his gaze calm yet razor-sharp. "This bank belongs to me, and when its soul is strangled by people like you, it is my duty to free it. This is not a game. This is the lifeblood of trust." Customers shouted back. "That's right! Finally someone dares to act! We've waited too long for this day." Kayla Trent broke down in tears, whispering, "It's all over." But Julian didn't stop. He turned to Amaya Brooks, his eyes blazing in the crowd. "From today, you will work directly with senior compliance. I want every complaint from 2020 to now unearthed. Every file, every letter. No voice will be buried again." Amaya's hands shook, her eyes wet with tears. She nodded, voice trembling. "Yes, I will, I promise." Julian nodded lightly, then turned to the customers. His voice rose, not in a shout, but with resonance that struck every heart. "Remember this. This is not just my story. It is your story for all of you who have been looked at with suspicion, who have been delayed because of how you appear. From today, you will not be silent. I will not let silence kill justice ever again." A middle-aged man with a weathered face broke down, crying. He whispered, "For years I thought I was just an exception. But I was never alone." The room stirred. Heads nodded, hands clasped tightly, sobs mingling with sighs of release. At that moment, Thomas Greer, a board member, spoke again through the phone in Julian's hand. "Julian, the media has caught the news. PR is awaiting your official response. The board authorizes you to begin a full reform. We all stand behind you." Julian nodded slightly, then turned to Sophie's live-stream camera. "Let the world witness. This is not collapse. This is rebirth. Apex Bank will no longer tolerate injustice. We will rebuild from the ashes, and today's fire is the proof." The crowd erupted again. Applause thundered, not scattered but unified, rolling like waves crashing to shore. In the corner, Derek Shaw stepped forward, trembling, his voice cracked but honest. I was wrong, but I cannot stay silent anymore. Nora told us to judge customers by first impressions. She called it client filtering. I obeyed, and I regret it. Julian faced him, stern but not merciless. "You will lose your position, but at least you preserve a shred of dignity for speaking the truth." Derek bowed his head, tears splashing onto the marble floor. Nora screamed, her voice breaking with fury. "You think you've won? Without me, this branch will collapse." Julian stepped closer, his gaze icy, his words cutting through his teeth. "I would rather lose the entire branch than keep a soul that has rotted." Nora choked, unable to reply. The crowd stared at her with contempt. Julian turned back to the customers, his eyes softening, his voice slow and steady. A bank is not marble walls. It is not giant account balances. A bank is trust. And today, I watched that trust shattered before my eyes. But from today, we will gather the pieces and rebuild a new foundation. The atmosphere hushed. A woman whispered, "He is not just a CEO, he is a guide." Julian lifted his head, light striking his resolute face. He delivered the final line, hammering it into every memory. A bank may lock its doors. A system may shut down. But justice will never be switched off. The entire lobby rose to their feet, applause crashing like drums of a new era. Applause roared through the bank lobby like a storming sea. But amidst the crashing waves, Julian Cole stood tall, his eyes burning with a fire that could not be extinguished. He raised his hand, and strangely enough, that single gesture was enough to silence the entire crowd. No more clattering keyboards, no more printers humming, no more murmured voices. Only the pounding of hearts, heavy breaths, and the suffocating weight of anticipation. Julian began to walk slowly toward the teller counter, where Amaya Brooks still stood trembling. She had never imagined she would become the center of such an upheaval. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes blazed like torches in the dark. Julian stopped before her, his voice clear and resonant. "Amaya Brooks, today you did what most would not dare. You spoke when silence had become complicity. You stood your ground when power turned into violence, and for that you are more deserving than anyone here." He turned to the customers, his voice firm and commanding. "From this moment on, Amaya will no longer be just a teller. She is appointed directly to Apex Bank's internal reform group, working alongside senior compliance. She will be the eyes, the ears, and the heart of the customer within this system." The lobby erupted. Applause, shouts, and cries merged together. Sophie shouted into her camera, "Do you hear this? This is how an institution changes, not only by punishing the guilty, but by empowering the brave." Amaya covered her mouth, her eyes wide in disbelief. She stammered, "Sir, I did not do this for a promotion. I only did it because it was right." Julian placed his hand on her shoulder, his eyes softer than ever. "And that is exactly why you deserve it." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. An elderly man nodded slowly. That is true leadership, recognizing value not in titles, but in character. Julian turned his back to her and faced the customers and employees who remained. He drew a deep breath, his voice dropping low, each word striking like iron on marble. "I declare, from today, Apex Bank enters a new era. No more shallow training, no more hollow displays of diversity. Every prejudice, in words, in glances, even in the smallest delays, will be eradicated, effective immediately. No warnings, no delays, no compromises." Sharp breaths filled the room, a young female customer raised her hand, her eyes shimmering. "For the first time, I believe this can truly change." Julian nodded slightly, then continued. "I was humiliated in my own house, but I will turn that humiliation into the very material to rebuild it. And I swear, no one else will ever endure what I endured today." The crowd erupted in applause again, this time fierce and unified, a collective pledge. At that moment, Thomas Greer, a board member, spoke from the phone still open in Julian's hand. "Julian, we have passed the resolution. You have full authority to establish the reform framework. All branches will report under the new standard. And Amaya Brooks will be the first face of this group." The hall exploded once more. Amaya nearly collapsed, her legs trembling as tears streamed down her cheeks. Nora Whitfield, slumped in her chair, still tried to resist. She screamed, her voice hoarse. "You are insane! A cheap teller cannot change an entire system. I spent my life building this branch, and now you destroy it in one day." Julian turned to her, his eyes cold as ice. "You didn't build this branch, you suffocated it. And today will be remembered as the day darkness was stripped away and light rose from the courage of the cheap teller you once despised." The hall roared, applause crashing like thunder. Nora fell silent, her eyes hollow. Julian stepped onto the center platform where sunlight poured through the glass. He raised the bank card Kayla had finally returned after holding it unlawfully, his voice ringing, every word echoing. Today, one card was locked inside a drawer, but tomorrow, millions of voices will be unlocked. This is the beginning of a new bank, a new foundation, and a commitment that will never retreat. Customers rose as one. Applause thundered like a storm, no longer dividing who was customer or who was staff, only people united in the face of rebirth. In that moment, Julian Cole was not just a CEO, he was a flame burning down the cold walls of injustice and igniting a path never before seen. Outside the glass doors, the morning light of Seattle spilled across the marble floor, reflecting the faces of those awakened from a long nightmare. Inside the bank lobby, the thunderous applause had barely settled when a flood of phone alerts rang out. Messages, notifications, and live views poured in like a tidal wave. Noah Patel glanced at his screen, his eyes wide. "Julian, hundreds of thousands are watching live. Sophie's video has passed 2 million views in just half an hour." The entire lobby seemed to tremble. Customers present realized they were no longer just bystanders, but witnesses to history, seeing firsthand an event that was already reaching the entire world. Julian Cole closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the enormous weight settle on his shoulders. But this time he didn't falter. He opened them again, his gaze sharp as forged steel. His voice rose, deep and commanding, like a waterfall crashing against stone. "If the truth has spread, then let it go further still. I declare before the public, Apex Bank will undergo reform nationwide. Every branch, every employee, every complaint ever buried will be unearthed. There will be no safe place left for prejudice." The crowd erupted once again. A young man thrust his fist into the air. "Finally! A CEO who doesn't just talk." Sophie turned her camera toward Julian, her voice trembling yet steady. "Everyone share this. This isn't just a story about a bank. This is a story about trust, about justice, about our right to be respected." Nora Whitfield leapt up, screaming, her voice cracked with panic. "You'll destroy the system. Nationwide reform. You're insane. The shareholders will revolt. The market will collapse." Julian turned, his face cold as ice. If the market collapses because of justice, then it should have collapsed long ago. I do not fear losing profit. I fear losing the soul. A deep gasp swept through the room. Tears welled in many eyes. An elderly woman clutched the armrest and whispered, "This is the first time I've seen someone truly lead, not just manage." At that moment, Julian's phone rang again. He switched to speaker. The voice of Thomas Greer, a board member, resonated through the hall. "Julian, the media has already broadcast the news live. The board supports the reform plan. PR has been given the green light. You have full authority to launch what you once called the Diversity Access Index." The lobby shook with murmurs. People whispered, their faces filled with wonder and expectation. Julian drew a breath and explained, his voice unwavering. "The Diversity Access Index. From now on, every Apex branch will not only be graded by profit or growth, but by the trust of its customers. Every complaint will become data. Every piece of evidence of bias will be a scar on that score. And any branch that fails will be restructured immediately." The murmurs swelled into cheers. Customers shouted, as though their stolen voices had finally been returned. Amaya Brooks clasped her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "He's rewriting the rules." Kayla Trent, her face pale as ash, slumped into a chair and muttered like a soul already broken. "No, this will spread. We've buried ourselves." Julian fixed his gaze on Nora and the complicit staff, his voice hard as steel. "You thought today was just a local scandal. But today is the beginning of an earthquake, and history will remember you, not as employees dismissed, but as proof of a system that had to be torn down." The customers erupted in cheers. Noah spoke directly into his live stream camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing the birth of a movement. This is no longer about one CIO. This is a challenge to the entire financial industry. No more space for prejudice and cover-ups." Julian stepped forward, standing beneath the shaft of light streaming through the high glass. His voice thundered like a storm. 30 years ago, I was doubted when I stepped into a bank because of my skin color. 20 years ago, I was denied service because of the clothes I wore. And today, in my own bank, I was dragged away from a counter because I didn't fit the image they wanted to see. But this time, I will not be silent. I will not bow. And I will not let anyone else suffer that fate ever again. Shouts shook the hall, fists raised high, tears streaming down the faces of customers. The bank lobby had become a square of justice. Julian lowered his voice, his eyes blazing with conviction. "Remember this. This is not my victory. This is the victory of every customer who was ever dismissed, ever denied. And from today, Apex Bank will no longer be just a financial institution. We will become the model for the entire banking industry. If you cannot treat people fairly, you do not deserve to exist." The crowd rose as one, applause crashing like summer thunder. In that moment, Julian Cole was not just a CEO. He was a symbol, a banner, and the crowd vowed to march behind that banner, through any storm. Within just 1 hour of Julian Cole's declaration, crowds had already gathered outside the Fifth Avenue branch. They had not come to withdraw money or deposit savings, but to witness the place that was shaking the nation. Local television set up cameras right on the sidewalk. The familiar logos of Seattle Daily, Northwest Consumer Rights, and even CNN were already present. Inside, the bank lobby was no longer a space for transactions, but had transformed into a vast stage. Customers refused to leave, staying on as witnesses who did not want to miss a single moment. The clicks of cameras, the hum of video recorders, the pings of skyrocketing live stream views filled the air. Sophie Kim looked at her phone screen, her voice trembling yet filled with pride. "We now have more than 5 million people watching live. Everyone. This is no longer the story of a small bank in Seattle. This is a revolution." Julian stood at the center of the hall, hands clasped behind his back, eyes closed briefly. He could hear the chants outside, the applause inside, and at the same time the vibration of his phone in his pocket. A message from his media advisor flashed across the screen. "Julian, be careful. A wave of backlash is forming. Some shareholders are calling this an act of burning company value. Conservative media accuse you of weaponizing race." He opened his eyes, exhaled slowly. He had expected this. Every revolution comes at a price. Amaya Brooks stepped closer, her face filled with worry. Mr. Cole, they won't let you walk away. They'll try to twist your words, to smear your name. Julian looked at her, his gaze unwavering. Amaya, if I feared being smeared, I would not have walked in here wearing a plain white shirt. The truth needs no armor, only someone willing to stand tall. Amaya nodded, tears welling in her eyes. At that moment, the voice of Thomas Greer, a board member, once again filled the lobby through the loudspeaker. Julian, the stock market is shaking. Apex shares have dropped 7% in just 30 minutes. But let me be clear, the board will not retreat. We will take short-term losses in exchange for long-term trust. Keep going. Every decision you make, we sign our names to it. Julian gave a slight nod, his eyes burning brighter. For the first time in years, he felt the board was not just a wall of numbers, but people standing with him in a real battle. He stepped up to the podium, staring directly into Sophie's camera. His voice thundered, slow and firm. Today, Apex stock may fall, but look beyond a number. The true value of a bank does not live on a ticker. It lives in the trust of its customers. If we lose that trust, then even if the stock climbs, we are still defeated. I choose to lose 7% today to reclaim 70 years of credibility. The entire hall erupted in applause. The sound spilled into the street, where the crowd roared in unison. But as the air burned with fervor, a reporter pushed forward, microphone raised toward Julian. Mr. Cole, do you not think firing the entire branch management on the spot will throw the system into chaos? And are you not turning an incident into a political weapon? The atmosphere sank. Everyone waited for his reply. Julian turned his head, his eyes sharp as a blade. I do not play politics. I do what is right. If a system collapses when justice is served, then the flaw is not in justice, but in the system. The reporter faltered, his microphone trembling. The crowd roared with applause, drowning out all else. Noah Patel lifted his camera toward Julian. Hear this. This isn't politics. This is human dignity, and dignity is never up for negotiation. Julian turned to Amaya, his voice softening. Amaya, you will not walk alone. I want to establish an internal justice team immediately. You will lead it here in Seattle. But every branch nationwide will have its own Amaya, someone willing to stand up when the truth is buried. Amaya gasped, her eyes brimming with tears that burned with resolve. I will not fail you. I will turn today's humiliation into fire to light the path. Julian nodded gently, his gaze sweeping across the customers. In each face, he saw old scars, suspicion, rejection, denial. And he understood that today he was not just breaking chains for himself, but for millions. Outside, the sirens of broadcasting vans blared. National live coverage had begun. Julian walked to the door and opened it. Light and cameras poured in. The crowd outside erupted into a sea of people, waving flags, chanting his name. Julian raised high the bank card that had been locked away in a drawer. His voice boomed like thunder, pouring into millions of ears and millions of hearts. Today, they locked this card in a drawer and called me a fraud. But in that very moment, they locked away the truth. And I tell you this, the truth can never be imprisoned. It will break free. And when it breaks free, it will sweep away every lie. The roar of the crowd was deafening. Cameras panned wide, capturing ordinary people transforming into an extraordinary force. Julian lowered his voice, his eyes blazing with unshakable faith. Apex Bank no longer belongs to me. It belongs to all of you, and anyone who dares to deny this truth will be cast out. Justice has begun, and it will not stop. The crowd exploded like a raging storm. In that moment, Julian Cole was no longer just a CEO standing in a bank lobby. He was a fire, a symbol, a vow unbreakable, and the tremors of that fire were already spreading from Fifth Avenue to every branch, every household, and an entire nation. 3 days after the incident at the Fifth Avenue branch, Seattle was no longer the same. On the front page of every newspaper, on the television screens of every coffee shop, across the endless flow of social media, the name Julian Cole appeared everywhere. CEO humiliated by his own employees. National bank rocked by discrimination scandal. Justice delivered in the lobby. Sensational headlines spread across America. Yet amidst all the noise, Julian did not appear on talk shows, nor did he give morning television interviews. He quietly worked inside his glass-walled office, still in his simple shirt, still in front of screens filled with reports. Because Julian understood, justice is not a PR stunt. It must be carved into the very foundation. On the 4th day, a cold number surfaced. 9.3 million views for the Fifth Avenue video. A record-breaking figure for a banking incident. Human rights organizations sent letters of thanks. Major investment groups demanded urgent meetings. And the Federal Financial Oversight Committee announced it would open an investigation. In Apex Bank's internal auditorium, hundreds of regional managers sat in silence, eyes fixed on the screen. Julian walked to the podium without notes, without a teleprompter. His voice echoed. You all saw what happened in Seattle. Do not fool yourselves into thinking it was just an isolated incident. Do not lie to yourselves that it was a few bad individuals. It is a mirror reflecting the entire system, and that system must change. He paused, letting the silence sink in, then continued. I do not care how much profit a branch brings if it is built on burying customers. I do not need polished reports if they are written by shredding complaints. From this day forward, we have a new metric: trust. The screen behind him lit up with the words, Diversity Access Index. The hall stirred, Julian declared firmly. Each branch will be measured by this index. Every complaint will be recorded. Every act of bias will be addressed immediately. And if a branch score falls into the red, it will be restructured. No exceptions. This is not a promise. This is an order. The whispers died. Managers lowered their heads. They understood. A new era had begun, and no one could escape. Meanwhile, in Seattle, the Fifth Avenue branch had transformed. Familiar faces were gone. Desks lay empty. On the wall where posters once advertised interest rates, there was now a whiteboard with handwritten words. We are sorry, and we are starting again. In the center of the lobby, Amaya Brooks stood in a modest suit, her eyes blazing. She was no longer the timid teller. She now led a new team, the Equity Integrity Team. Beside her stood young employees from other branches, volunteers determined to clean the system from within. An elderly woman entered, her trembling hands clutching an old savings book. Amaya stepped forward, bowed respectfully as she accepted it. That smile spread to other customers, slowly filling the lobby. No fancy slogans were needed. Real change began with eyes that met with respect and hands that served with dignity. 3 weeks later, in his office, Julian received an anonymous email. The sender was a retired regional manager. The content was short, but chilling. We all knew Nora Whitfield had been doing this for years. But no one touched her, because her numbers always looked good. Shareholders only looked at the reports. We stayed silent. Silence is complicity. Julian sat motionless. The words pierced his mind like a blade. It was not just one rotten branch. It was a culture allowed to fester, a systemic disease, and that disease could not be cured with a few firings. It needed a full-scale surgery. He called Renee Park. We are not just cleaning one branch. We are going nationwide. I want every branch reassessed. I want the scores published publicly. From now on, customers will know which branches are truly trustworthy. On the other end, Renee was silent for a moment before replying. Julian, this will change everything. This is not reform. This is revolution. Exactly, he whispered. A quiet revolution, but one that will echo across the world. 3 months later. Across the United States, Apex branches hosted community listening sessions. Employees sat side by side with customers, no longer separated by glass counters. Scholarships were granted to underprivileged students who once stood outside the bank in distant dreams. And right at Fifth Avenue, a new bronze plaque gleamed under the lights. It read, "This branch changed not because it was forced, but because one person reminded us. Silence has a price." Customers stopped to read, many with tears in their eyes. At his first press conference since the incident, Julian Cole stood before hundreds of cameras. He still wore a plain shirt, no tie. His voice was steady and clear. "I am not a hero. I am simply someone who has been dismissed too many times. But I chose not to stay silent. And I hope from today, each of you will also choose not to stay silent." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the room, then delivered his closing words. "True power is not in how many contracts you sign, but in having the courage to stand tall when everyone wants you to bow down." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. On Julian's face, there was no smug smile, only the steady gaze of a man who knew the fight was far from over. But he also knew he had just laid the foundation for a new era, one where justice would never again be locked inside a bank drawer. On that journey, a bank card locked away in a drawer may have seemed like a small matter, but it opened the door to a reform unlike any before. Julian Cole chose not to remain silent. He turned humiliation into a catalyst, anger into fire, and a small branch in Seattle into a symbol of justice. This story reminds us that fairness does not appear on its own. It requires people to rise, to speak, to act. And sometimes, just one moment of courage to speak up is enough to shake an entire system. If you believe that respect is not a privilege, but a basic right of every human being, press like to help this story spread. Subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the journeys where justice finds its voice. And before you go, leave a comment with one word. Justice, to affirm that you too believe justice cannot be buried, but will always find the light.